All right, well, thank you for having me. It's been an interesting 3 years since I retired from baseball in 2017. I officially hung them up. 2016 was my last year, and it's been my first experience in the real world, which has been exciting, strange, somewhat fascinating at times. But I'd like to start you with a story. And so a couple years ago, most notably in 2017, I was just having a really tough time processing the end of my career because it was difficult. I had been through a lot, and it was the only thing I did since I was a little boy. And so when I drive, I think, and I have a lot of time, and I listen to audiobooks, but a lot of times I just have no radio on. I'm just lost in my own head. And what I found in the immediate months after retirement was that I was pretty broken up, and I'd find myself teary-eyed, sometimes sobbing, just in these little car rides or just sitting in the parking lot. And so one day, I'm sitting in my car and I parked, and I start thinking about something that triggers the waterworks a little bit. I started to get teary-eyed, and I said, Dan, we're not going to do this again. We've been doing this a lot. I don't know what's going on, but you're going to be strong. You're going to march inside this Chipotle, and you're going to order yourself a burrito. We're going to be a big boy today. But, for being a big, strong man, it's best explained what was happening through the lens of who I was. I was a little kid. I went through 2 surgeries, and then I eventually became this grown man still playing the same little kid's game. And through all that, the thing that I think made it hardest for me to leave the game was that I had this idea that I was always building up to something, and I got better every year. I was an all-star my second to last season, and things were always building. But at the end, when I just realized I couldn't physically do it anymore, it was the first time that I came back and said, you know what, this fairy tale that I thought I had just isn't reality. And so at that point, with the door really shut behind me, all of us athletes, we kind of get used up and we're just kicked out, and it's see ya. And moving on at that point is the only thing you can do. And it's a difficult process, and I've been learning about the process and trying to find some strategies for myself and to help others in the future navigate this better. And so one person I came across, I got a little messed up here, but Nancy Schlossberg, her research at the University of Maryland was all about transitions. And she developed this main theory and this very practical guide of the 4 S's that she believes are very central to everyone's transition, whether you're a mother and you have an empty nest for the first time, you're laid off from your job, you're retiring, you're divorced, whatever it is, these major transitions that we go through can all be explained through these 4 S's, and they're different for everybody. So we're going to go through those a little bit today as they relate to me and as they relate to you. So the first one is the situation, and this can be vastly different. So you could retire to a huge nest egg, a beautiful home, and you're ready to go, and you have plenty of time to play golf, and everything's lined up. You could also retire because you're forced out early, and you don't have enough money saved up, and now you're in a very uncertain, stressful time. So 2 people are both retiring, but one has a very different situation than the other, which is going to change the stress, all these different things, these factors that are going to affect how you feel about it and how easy it is to move on. So for me, the one thing that I really gathered from baseball, with all athletes, and I worked with kids for a long time, I still do through YouTube and a lot of different means now, but parents always want to make their kids multidimensional, do other things, play the violin, you can play baseball too, and play volleyball and soccer, and that's great. But for many of us, and myself included, we often find a passion and we just dive all into it. And it was impossible for me to be truly multidimensional because I just loved what I was doing so much. And I'm sure there's a lot of us in this room who are in that same way. And when you look back, you could say, man, if I had done all these other things, it might have been easier, and that's probably true. But I also don't think it's wrong to be all in, to be really committed to your spouse, to your job, to the life that you have, knowing that it'll maybe one day make it harder to leave. You have a pet, you have a dog. I had iguanas and frogs growing up. You don't love them any less knowing that they'll one day pass on, but nonetheless, it does make it difficult. So the next one is self, and this is who you are. Everyone deals with stress differently. You have a soldier goes overseas, comes back with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. Another one could come back and be adjusted very quickly. So we all have our individual factors that are going to change how we approach a transition in life. So for me, one thing that I learned that was really integral to not only what I'm doing today is I'm changing not only my baseball career is a couple years in the rear view, but I'm also transitioning into a new, into speaking, into writing. I'm a freelancer. I'm working for myself, which is what I did, but I have a lot of things have happened in the last couple years with me, not just baseball, but also career moves, a geographic move. I lived in Illinois just 6 weeks ago. I live near DC today. And what I learned, what I think is most central to me is best illustrated through a story. So in my rookie season, I was trying to stay on the ball club. As my dad alluded, it's very cutthroat in independent baseball. They don't have to develop you to be a major leaguer. They just need you to pitch well so they can put fans in the seats. And if a guy has a string of bad starts, they have a line out the door of players who are calling to replace him. And so you feel this as a player. You feel like, okay, I've had one bad start. Now I have 2 bad starts. That's a pattern. 3 in a row is a really bad place to be. So I was early in my career. My first 2 starts were okay. My third one, I gave up 4 or 5 runs in the first inning. And this was, oh man, I'm sitting on the bench thinking I'm going to get pulled from the game. I'm also thinking that my ERA is rapidly climbing. And I know that to keep my team in the game and to help my own numbers come down, I need to put like 5 or 6 zeros up if I stay in this game. How can I pitch 6 scoreless innings today? That's a really large task, just the same as today I'm thinking I want to be this person in the future. Or one of you might want to be CEO or CFO, or you want to start your own company and see it be profitable in a year. Those are really big tasks that you can't manage today. But what I did that day and what I learned is central to being a good pitcher, good golfer, good hitter, is taking it 1 inning at a time. I could put up 1-0, and then I could also get this batter out, and I could also just make this one good pitch. And if you make this one good pitch, and then you make the next good pitch, sooner or later you look back 5 innings later and you say, well, I made 87 pretty darn good pitches today, and I turned in a good outing. And that's what I did that day. I think I gave up 1 run for the rest of the game and pitched 4 or 5 good innings and kept my team in the game and gave us a chance to win, which is a really valuable thing. So in these transitions, it can seem like, oh man, I have to change careers. How am I ever going to get back to where I was? You still have to kind of figure out what your central focus is, and it's still just a 1 day, 1 pitch at a time approach. Number 3 is support, and obviously this is going to vary from person to person as well. And one of the big things that I've figured out is that being tough doesn't mean keeping quiet and suffering in silence. What I figured out in the years since I retired is that no athletes are educated, it seems like, on their transition, on how to leave the game and what it's going to be like. And we also don't tend to talk about it at all. You know, I see my teammates, it's like, hey man, how you doing? You know, what are you up to now? Oh, I'm doing this and that, substitute teaching, spending a lot of time with the family. Oh, how you doing? I'm good. Like, a lot of us are not good. But as tough, macho athletes, we don't feel like we can talk about it. And this was a common theme during my playing career. When you're slumping, when things are going really rough and you're pretty torn up about it, you're worried about getting released, you're feeling all the pressure, it's very helpful to be able to vent to someone. But yet a lot of times if you vent to your teammates, they view you as weak. Your coaching staff views you as weak. Your coaching staff knows that you're thinking about how poorly you're playing, and so you end up just clamming shut. And so when I retired, I didn't think I had a lot of people in my immediate circle that I could relate to. But that actually was very, very wrong. You know, my mom left she was the director of Habitat for Humanity for 10 years, and she left that job, and she felt the same way that I did, that this was her identity, and it wasn't anymore. And she had a coming to terms with that over the next year or 2. Lots of us have our own journeys in this, and if we allow ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable and talk about it, it eases the transition significantly. As I started to open up to my teammates about how I was feeling and how lost I was for a while, they quickly opened up with the same stories. Lastly, strategies. So all these are it's not a linear motion from situation to strategy, but they're all intertwined. And so we can try to modify the situation. For me, there was no modifying the fact that I was done playing baseball. I couldn't get back in. But sometimes we can, and a lot of times it's just about moving on. And one of my friends actually said this as he and I were talking, and he started to open up about his own career, and he said, man, I just felt like in the 2 years that passed, it was more work, it was harder for me to just find one thing that I liked doing, one thing that I was passionate about, it was harder for me to figure out one thing to do. It was way harder than it was to be good at baseball in the first place. And I found that to be a very profound and also very accurate thing, that when we find something that we love so much and then it's gone, a lot of times it's just a mountain of work to find the next thing that we're really interested and passionate about. And so, again, this is why having support, having our families, and also being introspective and taking it one day at a time, trying to dig up and uncover our next thing can be really, really valuable. So again, the 4 S's, I think this is something that you should keep in your back pocket, because all of you, whether it's retirement, whether it's a new job, whether it's a relationship that changes, whether it's your pet iguana passes on, these are helpful to think about how your situation, yourself, your support system, and your strategies for moving forward can make your transition easier. Because I know everyone's different. Your situation will never be the same as someone else's. You'll process it differently, and your whole life experience is going to lead you to new change. And often they can be very, very positive if we let them be that way. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a quote, and this was passed along to me by a professor in college when I was facing my first Tommy John surgery, and I explained how I didn't know what the future held. I was going to miss the MLB draft that year. And he said, you know what? A resolute man will find a way. And if you're introspective and willing to do the work and dig and take it one day at a time, whatever transition you face in the future in your own life, if you're resolute and continue to move forward, you'll find a way. Thank you for having me.
Anyone have any questions?
I'll be around. So I never had shoulder problems my whole life. I was always good with my shoulder, always had elbow problems since I was 15. But at the end, it was bicep tendonitis, and they said basically that my bicep tendon was so inflamed that it was like permanently thickened, and it basically slides through a groove, and when it's too thick to fit through that groove anymore, you're just in constant pain. So it took me, after I just realized, I used to throw 91 to 94, and my changeup was 84 to 86. When I quit, it was just, I was exhausted trying to throw 80, and that was when I just knew. One night I was throwing a bullpen when my academy was open. I owned a baseball academy in Illinois, and I had a lesson with a 15-year-old right after. He was a really good pitcher, and I was just struggling. It was like 78, and I was exhausted. And then I watched this kid as I'm taking off my cleats, and he's warming up, and it's 70, 72, 75, 78, 79, 82, and I'm like, it's time. The young buck, he's 18 years or 15 years younger than me and does what I can't do anymore. I mean, my fastball was slower than my changeup at that point. So, and it took 2 years for it to heal where I could pick up a backpack, and it's mostly okay now, but I wasn't going to get surgery. I was too old. I was 31 or 32, so.
How many teams did you roll through over your time playing?
I played in 6 teams in 7 years. Yeah.
All in the same independent league?
I started in the front, so the independent leagues follow a similar structure to the minor leagues, where there's a sort of nebulous group of teams they'll pay guys like $200 a month. They're not really real leagues. The Frontier League is like a very well established. They have good stadiums, good crowds, like they're financially stable. I did a year in the Frontier League, then I was traded to this new league called the North American League. They were like a conglomerate of leagues. Halfway through that second season, they folded financially. So I signed with Fargo Moorhead in the American Association, finished that year, did terrible. Got released at the end of that season. Went back to the Frontier League, played for Evansville, blew my elbow out halfway through that year. Missed all of next season, played for Camden for 2 straight years. That was my only sort of continuity. And then the next year I moved to Long Island, and that was where my career ended. So it was a fun journey. I mean, I love playing in different ballparks, seeing the country. Those are the fun parts to me. I love being on the bus. It's like a downtime to, like, I'm going somewhere I want to go. I don't have to drive myself. Like, I don't have to work hard. Like, I have a little piece of heaven where I can just be here for 12 hours. And when I get there, I get there. So it was a good ride.
Tell them about the pay.
My first paycheck was $255.10. So they took 45 bucks out of my 600 per month paycheck. I ascended to 1,800 my last year. So when they talk about minor league pay and they're working actually to improve that now, it's a very real thing. I mean, if you have a wife and a kid, I don't know how you make that work. You know, I was very frugal, had my car paid off, and I left my apartment every year, so I drove out with no rent, no car payment, just a cell phone bill, ate a lot of peanut butter and jellies. And,
They had you living with families, or they had you at an apartment?
yeah, my first year I was a host family, and that was great because they fed me and very stable place to live. My second year, we were on the road actually for 7 weeks and the team folded. And then Fargo, I had a host family. Evansville, I was in a shared studio apartment with 3 guys. And then in Camden, that was the fun year. They did a very poor job. And the Atlantic League is a much older league. That's the one that's pretty local here, like the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. In Camden, most players are 28 to 30 plus, so they usually do have a spouse. And so the teams that provide stability get better players because, like, hey, my wife and my 2-year-old daughter is going to come. Like, they need a legitimate place to live. Camden didn't do any of that, and so they got less talent. But so anyway, so I joined the team. I had 3 days paid in the hotel, and then I had to find my own place. So I split a hotel room at the team rate, which was $65 a night, with a teammate for about 3 weeks. So we'd go on the road, we'd move out, we'd come back, we'd be in the hotel. And then they opened up the Rutgers Camden dorms to us. So I stayed in the dorm for like $400 a month for about 6 or 8 weeks. But between those 2 times, between the hotel and the dorm opening, there was a gap of about maybe 10 days or 2 weeks. And we slept in the clubhouse. So not as nice of a ballpark, a lot older ballpark of this. The fluorescent lights buzz all night, they don't really turn off. I actually, and a lot of the Dominican players, well, not just Dominican, but a lot of Latin players who they were sending money home. They had usually maybe like larger families than some of us. They slept there the entire year. And that wouldn't fly most places, but they let it happen there. And it was, so they had they'd sleep in the coach's office, places where it was a little darker. So the place that I've tried to get where I could get a little bit of darkness and be out of the main great room was the training room. But early on, I didn't realize that the ice machine was on all night. So every 90 minutes, I hear this like crash, and I jump out of bed as a whole new thing of ice fell down. And then I started turning that off, but then I got chewed out by the trainer who's like, why do we have no ice today? And so I found the balance of turning the ice machine off and then turning it back on when I woke up early so it produced enough ice for the game. But looking back, those are like the fun times. I mean, those are the stories that you tell to your grandkids and all that. So if it's all smooth sailing and beautiful ballparks, and it's, I don't know, it was a fun time. So well, thank you for having me again.